All right, so I was thinking about how to start this in my mind, and I was like, well, I'll probably just introduce them. It's Matthew Hammond and Jaiden how do you say
Fabrizio.
So you Americanize it.
Yeah.
You don't say Brizio.
No.
Nobody in your family says Brizio.
Well, my dad says it to be a try-hard.
but you're cutting that line now. No more Italian-sounding names.
I just say Fabrizio, yeah.
Well, you're Italian?
Yeah.
I knew that.
Yeah, super Italian name. And I was like, should I introduce him as Fabrizio or Fabrizio like it should be? But no,
you can do whatever.
He's gone with the Febreze branding. That's a good move.
Sure.
There. So let's start with you and go with your background, your age, how long you've been skimming, and then most importantly, like how you got into it, sort of first board, and what made you decide like, oh, I'm gonna do this now.
Well, I'm 19. I first started in North LA. My brother had a little Victoria Woody, and so I knew what it was since I was really young, but I never really did it. And then around 2016, I saw Jack Tenney Jig Squad on YouTube, and I saw that they had fiberglass boards, and I never knew it as that before. And then I just started going out on the Woody until I realized that the thing is terrible. And then I got my first fiberglass like 6 months later, and the rest is history.
It's interesting that you say. More and more I'm hearing people that got into it because of Jackson. I was like, it's like obviously it makes sense, but I never thought people would, because he's basically getting a bunch of people that maybe aren't skimboarders. All these outsiders that are just watching a YouTuber. And, like, maybe they just see his skim videos. It's kind of cool how he could have easily done second channel of skimming that, like, has no attention necessarily, and then his main channel. But he, like, really plays that. It's like, it really is just his channel. He's actually kind of done well to make it, like, his personality. So, Matthew Hammond, Victoria Rider. Why don't you go over, same thing, your age, how long you've been skimming, how you got into it, and then you can even go in a little bit about getting on Victoria and what that process is, especially being not from the traditional areas. That's always been kind of weird. It's like you're from LA, Ventura, Malibu, wherever, or even Santa Cruz, and it's like, how do you get in with, how do you basically compete with all the other Laguna kids that are getting sponsored?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started skimboarding in Santa Barbara. It's where I really grew up. I split time between the Bay Area and Santa Barbara. Then 5th grade on, I lived in Santa Barbara. So there's not many waves there in summer. I grew up surfing. Been surfing since I was 10. Every winter, go to Rincon, Sandspit. And in summer, it's just kind of like I didn't do anything. So there's this guy out there. His name's Dustin Stelk. Big shout out. He's kind of like the pioneer of SB Skim, I'd say. He's 10 years older than me, so when I was a little kid, he was a teenager, and I'd see him skiing like the longest waves every summer, and it's like, who's this kid? So when I was 16, I ended up kind of taking after him, grabbed a wave zone, actually. My first board I bought with some birthday money. Didn't know what I was doing. My name used to be Handjob because I'd throw sand on my board, so everyone would call me Handjob. I didn't know like kicking it was a thing, so I'd throw it on with my hand. But yeah, so that's how I started, was at Ledbetter, just running into tiny little ankle high liners and skiing like small little rides. But then I upgraded my board. I got an Exile, and that's where things started to get a little better. I started to be able to get kind of longer waves all the way into the beach. I was on Exile's flow team for a little, so I was getting hooked up. I started doing contests. My first contest, I think, was when I was 17, maybe 16, was Oktoberfest. Then I did the Vic. Pretty much got worked my first 2 contests. It was a learning experience. Started going down to Malibu quite a bit, and that's where things started to really kind of click for me. Just the beach break, meeting guys like Renee, Taylor. Renee at the time was an Exile rep, I believe, and Taylor was a slot stick rider. Doing their contest helped. And then, where I am today is I won the Vic a couple times, and I basically was with Exile, and the deal I kind of got kind of evaporated. So I hit up Vic and I was like, hey, like I've won your contest a few times. I've won a few other contests. What's the deal here? And they basically said they'd hook me up with the board, and since then, yeah, it's kind of where I am today. In terms of actually connecting with them and getting on their team, it's definitely difficult if you're not from the area. I'd say the biggest thing for me was just contest results, and I had that solid, like, hey, I've won your contest 2 years in a row. What deal can I get, you know? But for people who are maybe trying to get sponsored, trying to get on team, I'd definitely say enter contests, have a big social media presence. It's something I don't do, but it's definitely beneficial in today's world, I'd say.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard of you was Renee and Taylor's events. I'd gone to one of them. You were killing it there. I
remember competing against you. There's a photo of us on the podium together, I think, with, I think his name was Simon. He lives in Newport. Yeah.
Simon is... Dude, it's funny when you have a contest in LA and then somebody like Simon comes up and you're like, dude, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
You're going to smash us all.
Yeah, his tech is insane. I still see him at Balboa Pier.
His style is kind of insane.
Yeah, he's really good.
He's like shorter and aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking love that Newport style. But yeah, and then speaking of Santa Barbara, as far as untapped skim goes, that area is so underutilized and so fun. But it seems you have moved down here recently. What do you miss about Santa Barbara skimming, and then what's your favorite shit now that you're down here constantly and kind of feeling everything out?
I miss the crowds. There's no crowd at SB, basically. You can walk down and get waist chest highliners that go for 45 seconds plus, and there will be like 5 other guys out. Yeah. And not skimmers, we're talking surfers. I'll be the only skimmer out. So, just running laps and getting waves. And it's a tight-knit crew, so we're all friends down there, and we all know each other. We hang out, we skim. It's just a good time. And I like Laguna, I like OC. Like I said, I'm in Newport now, but the crowds, it takes me a while to get to the beach because of all the traffic. There's a lot of skimmers, especially if you go to Aliso, obviously, so you're constantly competing for waves. I think that's the biggest drawback. Is just, everyone. It's a tight-knit community in Laguna, and if you're not from Laguna, they don't necessarily know you, so you really have to fight to get waves, and it's kind of a struggle sometimes, and it can be frustrating when you're from a place as empty as SB. Yeah,
that was... I remember ages ago when I was first doing Laguna, it's like your first Laguna contest is a fucking nightmare. You can't even imagine how different the waves are, how good the locals are, and then just skimming there in general is rough. But I really recommend everybody do it because it has that upper echelon thing of like, if you're not pressuring to go for waves and prove yourself there, you just get cut off all day. Why wouldn't they? You don't look confident, you don't look like you're going to go. If it's a good wave, they're not going to let you waste it. So it kind of improves your contest skimming because you just learned. I was kind of telling Jaiden about that because the first time he went, he was kind of like looking at the cider and it's like 10th. There's good waves and you want to go, but then even if the wave's not good, like everybody there is going into your like shoulder, and you think it's weird, but it's like, well, when you're in Laguna, that's just kind of normal. It's just everybody's kind of egging for waves, and it's also a little kind of fun. It's not even localism. It's just like fun jockeying each other, and you gotta get into that. And if you don't get into that, then you don't get waves. But that's more on you, so more so than the other people. Speaking of better waves, down here, you had an injury at wedge, and it's kind of giving you complications. Can you go over the injury itself, and then more so the complications and how you're thinking about going forward with it?
Yeah, so I know other skimmers like the aforementioned Jackson Tenney have had similar issues with their shoulders. So I was at wedge. I said like probably 5 to 7 foot day, maybe first south swell really of the year. So I really wanted to check it out, get my toes wet again because I hadn't been in the water for a while. Side slipped to a set wave, got stuck at the top, tried to kind of eject, and ended up, I don't know if I hit the bottom or just the power of the wave just popped my shoulder out, but Full dislocation, I guess there's 2 types, a partial and a full. Mine was full, so the shoulder didn't pop in immediately, so it was just kind of hanging out. Had to get set back in the hospital. They popped it back in, and now currently I'm doing physical therapy. They said that'll take 6 to 12 weeks, but the sports medicine doctor is saying that I'll probably need surgery. So fingers crossed I don't, but it's probably going to be a lengthy recovery. I guess once it happens once, it's liable to happen again very easily. So I don't want that to happen. So yeah, it's a slow recovery, and especially skimming, you take a lot of spills and a lot of falls. So I'm cognizant of that, and just trying to do what the doctor recommends to get back out there.
They didn't say what the surgery is and what could be done to avoid it. Is it just like kind of inevitable at this point?
So I need to get an MRI first. I'm still waiting on that. Just had school and finals and haven't scheduled one. But once I get the MRI, I think they can see where the damage is, whether it's the rotator cuff. There's something that begins with an L, like the labrum maybe, or something like
Labrum.
that. Labrum.
Yeah.
And I guess those are like the 2 main areas that have issues. So I don't know what the surgery entails, but yeah.
Yeah, surgery sucks. I would know. So Jaiden, we'll move over to sort of being young and skimboarding, being newer. Obviously, Matthew and I have been in it for a while, but it's kind of, I think people during COVID thought it was going to have a resurgence, and to a certain extent, I think it's not having a resurgence, or it could, depending on what brands do, what events do going forward. How has it been as you get into skimboarding? What is your opinion on like the media, but not just the media, since there basically isn't any, but sort of the brands, the overall exposure of the sport to basically non-skimmers, like you're saying, Jackson getting you into stuff. I don't know how much skim content he makes overall. He's been making lately. We can't just rely on like Blair or Jackson or Austin. And then even when we do get people in, it always impresses me, like when you start skimboarding, then you take that next step, basically like buying a carbon board. That's a huge barrier to entry, and I don't expect anybody to make it over that barrier. How are you going to tell your parents? It's like you already bought whatever, a Woody, a Zap Wedge. Maybe you got lucky with like a higher end fiberglass, E-glass board. But getting that carbon board, and it's like, what do you think skimboarding needs, or more like your perspective? You've been looking at skimboarding, and how do you think it's we're going to get more people into it and basically get past that barrier? Because that barrier is the hard part. We see everybody come in, I got a Woody, I got a Zap Wedge, whatever. But how do you think skimboarding can promote to such an extent that we have long-term skimboarders getting carbon boards, competing in events, and then maybe later on they become part of the media routine? Because that's what we need. Like when I looked on YouTube for new skim media, it's like not only do I see nothing, but the only stuff I do see is like Blair, Austin, and Jackson, and then people
like Raza,
and then people reposting their content, and it's like we're in a dry spell where nobody wants to post content, and that's something I've been pressuring you to do. I'm like, you're kind of like, well, I don't know if, like, is it good enough? I'm like, don't care. Like, it's definitely good enough, and also we have none, so it's at least better than none.
Well, it's my perspective. I wanna say I can see it growing, but I'm not sure. Like it was bigger years ago, obviously, but with how many like ways to show skimboarding, it's crazy how it's not more popular. I want to say you need sponsors from like Red Bull or surf companies to grow it, but getting that sponsorship itself is the hard part. We can get like a Monster or Red Bull sponsor.
Yeah, but it doesn't,
something to fund.
It doesn't even need to be that tier. Because I forget who was I talking to? I was talking about the idea of missing a middle class. Sort of how there's almost a weird way of looking at the world, how there's like 1% and the poor, and they had this battle with the middle class, and that kills certain things. It kills certain industries and economies, and it can do the same thing to skimboarding. You can't just have a few dudes on carbons, and then a bunch of dudes on woodies, and then there's like no support group for the middle, whether that's like, when I was talking to David, I was like, amateur only contests. If we're not going to have any of those, then what do you have? You have a schedule where the best time slot goes to the 1% or whatever, and then they just fill the day with AMs. Why would anybody want to go to an event then, or want to continue to skimboard if that's how events are run? And I think, we did have amateur only contests then, and we did have a middle class then, and we also had more media, and it's unfortunate that it's gotten to that point. Hammond, you've been kind of running in that middle class for a while, and now you're in that sort of upper echelon. But I know I never really left the middle class. Like, I kind of fiddled with pro events, but being from LA, it was hard to get support. What was it like skimming all that time in Santa Barbara, probably spending more time in the middle class than, a Laguna kid who you, just by virtue of having those waves and being at those events so often, you almost get a chip shot into the upper class so long as somebody will give you a board. And the boards are easier to come by necessarily there because they're everywhere.
Yeah, it astonishes me. I see some of these kids and no disrespect, I think it's cool that their parents are so supportive that they're driving them to the beach. They have big sponsors already. I see Colton might be sponsored by GoPro maybe and stuff like that, and their parents do a great job of putting them out there. And I think that's kind of cool. This upcoming generation does have a little of those sponsors that we're discussing earlier. But for me, like you said, I grew up in that middle class of skimboarding. My parents wouldn't take me to the beach. I'd skateboarded the 3 miles to get to leads, and it's just different. You don't have the resources. You have to be really passionate and driven. So many people in Santa Barbara will start skimboarding for one season, and then they're like, oh, this is hard, this is expensive, and then they just quit. They do need to bridge that gap that exists between the people who are on the woodies and the carbon, because people just go straight to that carbon board. They're not buying an E-glass or an S-glass, because why would you when it's basically $100 less or $75 less or whatever. So yeah, it's very hard to get into, and it's very hard to stay with, just because it's such a difficult sport to learn.
Fucking pulled the whole door open.
This wind is crazy today.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. You can only imagine what it's like in Ventura right now.
Oxnard, always windy.
Fucking tornado.
Are you cruising on the Nard?
The Nard.
Some Nardigans.
I've never been to the Nard.
The Nard. There's some ghetto parts there.
I'm not a back Nardigan.
Nardigan.
I was going to ask you about sort of your opinion on the media. So, being your age, you probably saw. So there's a sort of an action sports death, I would say. It started in 2010. And then it kind of peaked in 2015, where action sports was dead. X Games was just showing car racing, and video games had become just a complete inundation of sort of the youth's time. What was the skim media like when you was first getting involved into it, and what was your opinion on it as you kind of saw it decline? You would be seeing the end of things like Skim Online, Forever Skim, sort of the taming down of 10th Street Bros, etc., kind of all those initial things slowly dying off, and then we'll get into sort of the newer media.
Yeah, so I'd say the first action sports media that I really consumed was surf magazines. So that's what got me into surfing. I was reading Trans World Surf, which is now gone. I think Surfer's now gone. So that was really what got me into action sports. I think in terms of skim media, it was Skim Online for me, because once I started going to Malibu, you could check out the spots on there and see what people were saying about it. So it kind of gave me some insight. Also, there used to be something called Pulse Skimboarding magazine. I think David Hafley, maybe Jackie, I think was her name, were the ones who were running that. And that was something that I would read and I'd check out when they put out a new issue. But I think that also is now unfortunately gone. But yeah, I think that's part of the reason why action sports were so popular, is because there's so many different outlets to consume media to stay up to date. You had like YouTube starting to get popular, so people could. I remember sponsor me videos used to be a huge thing. Magazines, 10th Street Bros, like surf films. I remember watching Step Into Liquid got me inspired to start surfing. And now there's just none of that. It's all short YouTube clips, short Instagram clips, and you don't really get a feel for what the sport's like or the culture behind it, I'd say.
Yeah, and so there was a transitionary phase, and it's like things were basically dying in that transitionary phase, because we used to have all these dedicated websites, dedicated forums, all this hobbyist stuff, not just skimboarding, but everything had this. And then it all went onto social media and everything splintered. So now we're kind of like readjusting to how people are using the internet these days, which is like really strange. David went over a little bit, but he didn't want to go too much into it because it's so weird how it's not just how we're using it, but it's how these companies who are owning the platforms, like, forums, I don't know if y'all remember forums back in the day, but it was just like, I made one. And then, Peluso made his, and it's like, that really is your forum, and then you can choose whether it's just a forum or you're advertising on it or whatever. But now you have a platform where it's like, so if I'm Blair or Austin and I make a YouTube video or an Instagram video, I don't just have to make a good video. I have to make a video that's centered around views and retention, such that the next there's a whole sidebar. You cannot change YouTube's sidebar. You can't just make it like, YouTube, I want you to only recommend my videos within whenever anybody's on my page. So you have to compete with, they just show random stuff, and it's technically supposed to be your personal preferences, even though it's not. A lot of times it's just another channel. Like, they'll just put I don't watch football. They'll put NFL videos on the sidebar to keep drawing. They want people stuck on the platform and clicking, views. But maybe that's not really good for our sport, but people are having to play in that field. How would you like to see people, not even necessarily like Blair and Austin, I would want to focus on people like Timmy Gamboa, who, shout out to him, he's doing his podcast now, and then the younger kids like Zach Henderson, and then maybe a really big one is like Colton. So he has a great opportunity, whatever his opportunity is, like, we don't know it, but he has a great chip shot of just super talented. I don't know if you've seen, like, he does everything and he's good at it, so he can approach these platforms in a really good way. But how would you like to see him approach it in terms of skimboarding media long term?
I mean, I feel a smart move for him is to build his social media, which I hate saying, but I feel like that's what companies want. They want to see, how many Instagram followers does this guy have, and that's how you get free stuff. You can earn sponsorships that way. But I would like to see kind of a shift back towards kind of the roots of skimboarding media, maybe. More or less, like, right now we have 30-second posts, pictures. But I'd like to see more complete content that highlights both the lifestyle, the culture behind it, as well as obviously good skimming and good clips. I think the last time I really saw that was the Shore Break movie, where you actually kind of got a flavor of not just skimboarding. You didn't just watch a movie like entirely composed of skim clips, but you actually got some history behind it. You had interviews with legends, like I think Tex Haynes might have been in there, and it was really informative and kind of fresh from what we're getting now. So I'd like to see more of that, more content that captures the culture and the vibes and skimboarding and how it differs from things like surfing and skateboarding and all these other sports that are kind of grouped in there.
Yeah, that was... Short break was, like, so much better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And I especially at the time that it was, I forget exactly when it released, but I was just like, Skimboard is so low right now. Like, I can't imagine whatever he's producing is going to be good, or like, are they going to go out of their way to make it a full production? And like, they really did, way more so than I could have imagined.
The only channel I actually watch now is Blair's channel, and that's because I feel he posts unique content. I skip over some of the videos, but he goes to unique spots. Like, I saw him in Huntington the other day, and it's like, oh, that looks fun. Like, kind of posting different spots and things that are unusual, and I don't know. So I forget, is it Skim Kid or
Skid Kids?
Skid Kid, yeah. I've been enjoying that content lately.
What about you, Jaiden? You could touch on some of the younger guys, and maybe even your own perspective, like being raised in the sort of TikTok era and sort of resisting the urge to like just post a 7-second clip with like a bunch of editing on it, and you're like, wow, that was great that I did a tiny clip with like a voiceover and a song and editing. What are you, if you were going to do anything in the future, what is your motivation to make media? And then what would you like to see from dudes like Colton who like have a good opportunity to maybe even set the pace? Because when I think about stuff like Jackson or Blair, it's like they set a standard and it's pretty good, but I think it could be adjusted a bit more towards... The one thing I never liked about the Blair, Jackson, Austin thing is that it really is... Blair was... It was nice that he did, like, Skid Kids. He didn't do Blair Conklin YouTube channel or something. But at the end of the day, it really is just Blair content. It's almost like... I mean, you have a big platform. You have a huge platform. And it's like... And he does skim with a lot of people, but... It's a shame, because imagine if it was let's say Pulse Skimboarding's YouTube channel that had that much viewership and retention. Well, why don't we just throw a nice edited Timmy Gamboa edit on that platform? If Timmy makes an edit, or if Zach Henderson makes an edit and he posts it to his channel, and that's the thing, is they're not mutually exclusive. He can post it on his channel, and Blair can say, oh, like, that was sick, I'll post it on my... But there seems to be this... Like, people don't do that. I'm not sure if it's just they're not talking about it, or if they really think, like, it's not in my schedule of, like, how I organize that. So what have you been making lately, and then what would you like to see Colton do? Should he just be another Skid Kids, or do you think there's a better idea of how to do that?
For Colton, I think, like Matt said, social media presence would be big. I mean, I hope that he could get a following and help grow skimming, but it needs to be more so about the community. I'm not sure if he should do clips of other people or how it could work, but I feel like it should be more community based if you want to grow skimming, as opposed to like a personal thing. You're just pretty much posting to grow your own following. Like, that wouldn't be good. As for myself, I'm kind of just putting together the videos, just getting my footage out there, seeing if, I don't know, anyone in the area wants to skim or something like that, because Ventura Malibu's pretty dead. So, like I said, try making the content more about skimboarding as a whole, as opposed to trying to grow your own personal brand. Probably be the way.
Yeah, and you could do both. And then with the kids like Colton, Colton and Paul Carey and what's Thomas's last name? Little Thomas.
Hernandez.
That those kids, if they, it would be a shame if if Colton and his parents were just like, man, we have a really good opportunity here. We're going to make the Colton channel, and it's going to be awesome. And it's like, that kid has so much content. It's like he could do that. But it would be a criminal shame if it didn't really involve all those other kids, and if they couldn't put something together, even if it was a side project. Don't care if it's a second channel, that's fine. But it would be so awesome to have like a Colton, Paul, Thomas, all those other kids sort of channel or platform, because they're skimming is so on another level, and it's like, you don't have to all grow your own social media with your name. It doesn't have to be about your name. Like, you can almost do more if you make a platform. But I think there's so much, there's like precedent against that right now, which is real unfortunate. Like, well, Austin has his own thing, but I'm like, yeah, Austin is a lot of his viewership came from outside skimboarding. Mm-hmm. And a lot of his most viewed videos aren't his skim videos. And same with Blair. Like, he has a great channel that's clearly about skimboarding and skid kids. Well, a lot of his videos are about the river surfing and like winching and more these interesting outside things. So like, I'm not going to say they got lucky, but it's just, I think people connect that line too blatantly, too black and white about like, well, look, obviously it's a skim channel. I'm like, kinda. I don't know. Who's to say it's not 100% skim?
I think the issue with that is that they're trying to create a career in skimboarding and monetize it, and they're trying to build their brand, like you were saying. And in doing so, they're kind of isolating themselves to make sure that their viewership is going up as opposed to the communities in general. I'm not saying that's intentional, but it's just what they have to do because that's what their career is. Perhaps I think what would be beneficial is someone who maybe doesn't rely on skimboarding for a career to come in, who's just passionate about the sport and say, hey, we have all this great content. Why not bring it together and, like you said, create that platform? I think that's what's really lacking.
Yeah, it's hard to. I like did that whole thing of like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make a channel and be more about me skimming and then my friends skimming. And then I really wanted to do LA because LA is so. I mean, we don't really have great waves, but it's so underrepresented. So I was trying to draw more interest, and then I did a bunch of random stuff like a blog, and then in starting this podcast. But I burnt completely out in between like 2010 and 2015, and that's what happens. That's the issue, is you get your passionate guys, and it's anytime we talk about what happens in skim, like events or brands, you get that whole thing of like, this is just roots, and like, this is all about passion. And it's like, yeah, I know, but the problem is you're almost talking about it like it's a good thing. It's an objective thing, like we can look at it that way, but let's not sort of glorify that aspect of saying like, oh, it's small. It's like, that's not a good thing. It's kind of a good thing for us sometimes when we're at the beach and we're not competing with 20 plus dudes for waves on a good day. But there's a little bit of I think there's almost a push and pull, which is unfortunate with people who want stuff to grow a lot. You get the kids and they're like, it should be in the X Games or the Olympics. And I'm like, it should not. Did you see when they tried to put surfing in the X Games? It was awful. It doesn't work with those formats. That's not how it works. And then you have other people that are, would probably get real salty about people having sponsors. And it's the same people who show up to Aliso and they're like, there's so many people at Aliso. I'm like, then go somewhere else. Yeah. It doesn't have to be super small or super big, but it would be nice to get it to a little middle class state where it was. I mean, that's kind of where it was. It would just be nice to get it back to where it was. I don't even need it to be bigger than how it felt from like 2000 to 2010.
Yeah, it seemed like the tour back then too was more organized and more of a serious thing. And now the tour is basically a joke. I don't even know if it's happening every year, who's winning or anything. And something I used to follow kind of closely, actually. So it's kind of disappointing, like you're saying, just to to see how far it's gone down since that early 2000s point.
Yeah, I the way David was talking about it, he was basically like, it's just me, like putting in whatever effort he can to make sure that the numbers get ran and the points check out, and that there's kind of a bit of an explanation. But we really just need consistent coverage now. I mean, if you look the past 5 years, any contest coverage, it's like there's a different person each year, and it's not always, I think last year it was kind of like I did some contest coverage, and then the year before that it was like Chance's dad made a video that was worth watching. I'm not even saying these aren't even people who are like paid to do it or were part of an organization. I just mean it's so disjointed that you have like what's the NorCal kid that always films and his dad films, I think?
Daniel.
Yeah, his dad made like the best video a couple years ago, and it's like, why does it have to be this way?
Yeah.
Especially in the age of like such good cameras. To an extent, you don't even need a nice cheap camera like I have. These phones are so good. You could, if you really wanted to, you could just cover a whole event. Just go, basically for a really good video, you just go to the pro heats, whatever the pro heats are, and then you can leave for the rest of the day, essentially. It's unfortunate that it's like that, but monetarily, yeah, you are basically asking for volunteers. But then my question is like, well, where did all the volunteers go? We had them in between 2000 and 2010, and people seem to really love social media and filming, so it's like, why is there a dead spot where people don't want to film, they don't want to edit, they don't want to produce good things? Is it just because they're getting rewarded for the 7-second TikTok clip, so they actually objectively don't want to?
I mean, the only consistent person I can think of is Laguna SoCal. I was just like picking my brain for a sec, like who's been there since I've started skimboarding who constantly puts out media, and that's probably the only person that I can think of. She's always taking pictures of the events, but yeah, I remember Tony Bianchi was doing the filming for a while, and he'd put together the edits after each contest. That was like 2013, maybe 2014. And now I don't even know if there's contest videos on the UST YouTube channel. I don't even watch it anymore. Just it's sad. It's disappointing because it's like you said, it's easy. Anyone can really do it with a smartphone these days. And it's one of the biggest gaps in skimboarding is that no one knows these contests occur and no one can go back and watch these contests. So if someone just puts in the time, like you're saying, and steps up and does it, I think it would be beneficial to the community as a whole. What about your guys' Reddit skimboard tour, skimboard contest
the Triple Crown?
Yeah, the Triple Crown.
Yeah. That was, unfortunately, I ran, my whole thing was just that this is just a microcosm of my life. I made it as simple as possible so that nothing could go wrong. And then right at that time, I had a dental emergency, I had dental work, and then so that made it so I can't pay out the little, like, tiny kiblets I offered for people to come out, and then my car started breaking down right before. It's just, and this is kind of relevant to how things are in skimboarding. It's like I wanted to do that just because I knew I could at the time, and had nothing gone wrong, it all would have been fine and worked out. But when you're relying on one person who's doing this thing out of some sort of charitable volunteer effort, that's precisely what happens. You can't have things where one person's putting in a ton of effort, and then with one tiny little financial emergency or something as innocuous as their car not starting that morning ruins a whole event or something like that. And I hope we can get people working together a bit more, because I think the last one, the one my car broke down was I didn't get to go out to San Diego. Or was that
Seal.
Was that Seal?
Yeah.
That didn't work. Oh yeah, I think it broke down at Seal, and then I just basically called off San Diego because I didn't have any money at that time. And I was telling the San Diego boys, I'm like, do you guys know that there used to be an annual Skim Fiesta at the date that I set every year, and that it used to be like a huge event. Like we'd fill the Wall Cove up with people, and it was one of the most fun events. And I think a lot of that history, almost like the evidence of those stuff, got lost. Like if you look at old videos on YouTube, they're all downgraded to 240p, and sometimes they have like comment purges where you don't see any of the comments anymore. Like weird wonky stuff happens to old stuff. Skim Online, I think the last time I tried to go on Skim Online, it told me not to do it because it was an insecure connection. I was like, Jesus Christ, like how do we expect people to even know that past if there's no evidence for it now? The Reddit and Discord thing is like I was saying to David, I don't know if that's going to work, but one thing I do know is that it's never going to work in isolation, because that's the whole thing I've been doing is like, I really don't want to use social media. I don't want to use TikTok or Instagram, but it's like I'll try to pitch into Reddit and to Discord and YouTube, and I'll do whatever I can to try to build something, and then hopefully other people are getting inspired. But I just feel like nobody's really motivated, and this is why I'm so glad that Timmy started doing the podcast, and hopefully he continues to do that, because whether I'm doing little jams, events, or a podcast, or starting Reddit, Discord, I feel like everybody looks at it and they just go, oh cool, this is a thing I could watch or use. And I'm like just make it better. Like I know there's people out here who can do a better podcast than I can do, who can run a better event than I can do, and they're just not. And whether it's a money thing or a motivation thing, we need to sort out what it is, because I mean, a lot of these skimmers, especially this next generation, presumably, so if you're from Orange County in this next generation, you probably have a pretty good life. Financially. Living in SoCal. A lot of people in the coastal areas are pretty wealthy in general. So it's like, I'm not saying people need to chip in their money, but I know these are talented, smart people. And that's kind of what built that middle class like 10 years ago. Or 20 years ago. I'm fucking old. Like 15, 20 years ago. It was just talented, wealthy, coastal living people who put their effort into skimboarding. And we need that again.
Jaiden, how would you feel about bringing the Malibu contest back now that you're the guy on the scene down there? The Gold Coast Classic, I think it was called.
I'd be down to do that. It'd be a lot of work, but if we could get people to come, then I'd fully do that.
Yeah, you did. You were basically running the show for me when we did that little event.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. Like it's a shame that the rest of the events and series didn't really pan out. But that event is my favorite one, because I'm up here, so there isn't a SEAL event. So I was kind of planning on doing a jam there. And then the Gold Coast hasn't been a thing for a while, so I'm definitely wanting to bring that one back, and then maybe even something like Central Coast. I'm not sure where. Like, we had a really weird one. I forget where it was. It was near, like, Avia, Pismo era.
Guadalupe Dunes, maybe? Or
it was like a dune
Shell
area.
Beach, maybe? I don't know, one of those two.
I think it was Shell, which was ironic, because I was like, that sounds like a crappy beach. Shell Beach in the Pismo area. That sounds like... And I don't know, the waves just turned on for that event. And it was really fun. And it's a shame that we're not having events like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'd love to have a Santa Barbara event, a Malibu event, a San Diego event, kind of maybe bring those less known places, less known spots, and give them a little exposure and get people to venture outside Laguna. Would be cool. Obviously the pros would show up. I think it'd be an awesome way for amateurs to get some contest experience and on some different waves potentially.
Yeah, getting people to travel. That's the big thing, because I see a lot of beginners and there's no motivation to leave, so why would they? And then they get stuck in whatever routine there is, even if they have good waves, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them are in areas with bad waves. And then if you never, like, I hate to say it, but if you do invest in skimboarding, if you get through that barrier, you get a carbon board or whatever, you should one day eventually go to Laguna and feel what it's like to stand on a beach with waves that you probably can't skim, because if you haven't been there yet, it's very intimidating, and then a bunch of other skimmers. And that experience is really important, and that could be like the next thing that chip shots you into it further. Because, I don't know, there are some people who they sort of stay in that middle class and they just skim their local spot, and that's cool. But generally speaking, those aren't the people that are actually growing the sport, because, you know, Austin is from Georgia. I don't know exactly why he came over here. I don't want to claim it was for skimming. I'd have to ask him, but, you know, he's from Georgia, came over here, and when he initially came over, he was already killing it. He was already getting, like, skimming Malibu, doing insane stuff, and then just got good at skimming Laguna, and, like, it's like totally self-built man, as weird as that sounds to say, but, like, that's the reality of it. However he did it, he just came over here, skimmed well, and then somehow turned that into a whole career of just traveling the world and doing what he wants. When you talk about your new board and ordering from Gary and the experience of talking with Gary, and I think that's an important topic, because this is another thing that's happened recently, is people don't know that you can get a custom board.
True custom.
Exactly.
Right.
They go on a custom order form and they're like, dude, I got the most custom board ever, dude. I picked XL, and then I picked paint, and I picked the like Samsonite paint job, so custom. Back in the day, like, none of us had boards like that, and it was funny because when skimmers first tried to do pro models, like, we were definitely roasting on them, like, really cringe. Why would I buy your skim board? But obviously that makes a lot more sense, especially now we're in the era of the Blair Akuta. I mean, that board almost drove interest just by virtue of A, being really aesthetically good looking, like they did that custom paint job for his model and that looks good, and just the shape of it is, like, interesting. Because nobody necessarily wants, I don't know, if you hold up a pin board and hold up a Blair Akuta and you show it to a, like, preteen kid, he's like, damn, look at that pointy board, that thing looks sick. But so you got a custom board. That's kind of how we ordered back in the day. You would literally tell them, you'd always be like telling them dimensions that don't work, and they're like, let me adjust the numbers and draw it out so that it just makes sense, both in the rocker table and how it'll ride. But speaking of bad dimensions, you made a pretty awkward board. How was that process? Did the board that you get, was that, like, exactly what you told Gary? Did he just throw it out the window and make whatever you wanted, or did he kind of tell you what to change on the board to make it work?
Well, Gary, shout out to Gary, over at Velocity. No, he made it pretty much exactly how I asked him to do it. We made it super wide, super full shape, if you've seen it. So he was a little iffy on it, but he thought I'd hate it, but I was working my way up, just trying out different boards, seeing what I liked, and I just knew that one would work. But he made it completely how I wanted it to. There's no order form. I had to message him, mailed him a check, everything. It was old school. But yeah, it was cool. I love it now though. And he's just doing different things. He's trying out different stuff, so with getting like a real custom board like that, you can really tailor the board for yourself. Like, he's just experimental. You can get super technical with your boards when you have someone who's really willing to try out sort of new things and kind of stray away from the classic kind of generic model.
Yeah, because it's one of those boards where the majority of riders look at it and they think like, wow, that thing's probably shit. And then if they ride it, they will be shit at it because it's not necessarily, doesn't fit their style. Like if you're back foot heavy, that board might be a little weird because you need to weight the front to turn it, which is actually how your style is. It's very odd. Most people have a weak front side, especially when they're starting. You have you almost started with a stronger front side and then worked from there to balance it out. And that's how you eventually get that progression in boards, is by doing that. And then you know, it's really good if you can try other people's boards, but you try whatever. You try like a Dude Cruise, then you try a Hornet, and you kind of work stuff out. And then once you're ready, again, it is a barrier to entry to do that. So if you already bought a carbon board and then buying another one is just another prohibitive financial move. But moving on from that first board to that second board, so that, because the other one's basically bone stock. Doesn't matter if you ordered it on a custom order form. If it's already something in their lineup, that means that it's so generic that they're willing to sell it to a bunch of people. Like the Tombstone, which is kind of like a super modified Dude Cruise, they've Gio's been riding that forever and been killing it on it, but I think they know that it's so difficult to ride for the average person. They wouldn't even want to risk putting it up. You don't want to put it on your website, have people buy it, and then be like, am I a bad skimboarder? Is skimboarding not for me? And it's like, no, you need talent. Like, everybody maybe should start on sort of a pin, basic, rounded. But once you get enough talent and develop your own style, then you can move on to stuff like not necessarily a Dude Cruise, but like a Tombstone or your board, which is like very challenging to ride, and you have to do really weird things with the front foot. Hammond, are you still on a pin, the lift?
Yeah, so I'm loyal to the pin. I've never had anything but a pin. I'm not really like a board head. Like, I don't like changing up my boards that often. I'm comfortable with what I have and it works for me. I will say though, Victoria has been awesome. They've been open to working with me and kind of changing up from what I had before. I used to be on a medium 5/8, just standard hybrid shape, like probably the most basic board you could get from Exile. And then when I went to Victoria, I bumped that up to 3/4 with tapered rails, and then have a medium large. And I'm considering maybe just going 5/8 for the whole thing for my next board. But yeah, I'm on the pin. It works really well on liners, which is what I prefer to ride in Santa Barbara. Tried a Dude Cruise out there, and it's great. The float's great, but I couldn't turn it. I've tried the Blair. My buddy had one, and I hated it. Not that it's a bad board, it's just not for me. So yeah, I don't see any merit in switching at this point in time. I'm 26, I'm not getting any younger, so might as well go with the tried and true.
Old reliable,
exactly. Absolutely. Do you still have your Vic Flying Fish?
I do.
Yeah, you don't
I
use
still
that
have
thing.
that. No.
Yeah, no, I don't like that shape.
Yeah.
That whole shape just doesn't work for me.
It's just, I don't know. The turns I want to do don't work on that tail.
See, that's how it was when I tried your Tex Haynes model. I tried to turn that, and I just like slid out on the board and went flying out the back. That thing is beefy.
It's just too wide. Too wide.
Is it wider than your Vic or your Velovic or Velocity?
No, they're the same width. And that's what I was gonna say. It's just whatever works for you. Like the board I had from Victoria was their Wingfish, the Tex Haynes Wingfish model, and I got it 54 by 23. So it was like pretty much as wide as you want to go. Like that's maxed out. And it was great, but I wanted just the fuller nose. Like I didn't see why I shouldn't just maximize at that point and just like fully send into it. So I got it 1 inch shorter, but I still kept it 23 inches wide, which is still a total chode, but
it's about as wide as you can go on like
yeah.
I think anybody's blank. So the skim blanks, I don't know if anybody, because you wouldn't want any wider.
Yeah.
And the only time you go wider is if you were also making something weird and longer, like the skim surf shape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't you have a skim surf, Teddy? Or
you got the beast.
Well, the weird thing that happened, I never got a skim surf in particular, because when I surf, I like my boards to work. But
true.
But what happened was, so when I originally went to make the beast, which is an oversized 1 inch board, like I went to every brand, and the only brand that like initially outright said they could do it was Victoria. And it was really weird because I was like, oh, this is all great, and then they just stopped messaging me. And I wasn't sure if it just got lost in like a shuffle, because a lot longer conversation would be like, can you make a board that makes no sense, or just ordering a standard board. So it either happened that way, or after a while they were just like no, we don't want to make this board. Like it was so weird or something. Slot Stick offered to do glue 2 blanks together and then trim from there. And I was like, that's interesting, but I don't want to do that because I don't know the implications of that sandwich. I'm sure it'd be fine, but it was just kind of weird. And then Exile was initially like, no, we don't have anything to make that. We don't have a blank that works for that. And this was actually before that whole skim surf thing kind of came out. It was nearly at the same time. And then they made that board, and I messaged them like, hey, so you have blanks for that board now, right? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. I had to like drag Hank through the weeds just to get him. He was like trying to talk me out of it. And I'm like, I know it's a bad decision, but I just want it. Let me make it.
That whole skim surf craze was short-lived. I remember Tom Curran in SB was like kind of the pioneer for a while. I'd see him out at Rincon with foam glued to his skimboard basically, and it was wild.
Well, it went where it deserved to go because most surfers aren't Tom Curran.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, anytime I see the stuff like the catch surf boards, and like beginners will say, obviously if it's like the long board or the wavestorm board, I don't mind. When the beginners say they want to like try the shorter boards, I'm like, look at how well Blair and Jamie O'Brien surf when they're on a board that makes sense and works, and look at how much they struggle on the catch surf. That, if performance is even remotely a concern, that shouldn't be the board. If it's more of like price and I want to throw it on the ground when I'm in the parking lot and not worry about it breaking, blah blah blah, that's fine. That makes sense. Like that's why I love boards like that, Wavestorms. I treat them like dog shit, and they can't really break necessarily unless you take them to like 10-foot wedge or whatever. But speaking of boards that work, you're riding a pin, and then I think there's a comparison. Jaiden he's like finding his style, finding his skim style, and also he's in LA Ventura area where the boards that he's riding make a lot more sense. But you're not just, so you're down south now, but also your skimming level is sort of at that upper echelon where just having a pin that works really pays off. Explain what you like about the pin. We'll do a little Blair Acuda roasting for a bit. Explain the benefits of the pin when you're, basically like skimming at a competitive level. When you want to make sure that you're skimming at your highest level, why do you ride the pin? What reasons would you specifically avoid like a Dude Cruise or a Blair Acuda, or even maybe something like ultra thin like a Hornet shape or whatever?
Yeah, for me it's just versatility. You can have multiple styles, like I have kind of the way I ride liners, and then I have the way I'll deal with beach break, and it's a full spectrum. It works from mushy Leadbetter liners to Aliso or wedge, and I feel comfortable with my board, and that's gonna perform how I want it to perform, and it's consistent. When I went to the Blair Acuda at Leadbetter for a little, I was just trying it out. No float, first of all. Like, I could barely generate any speed. I'm sure it's better maybe in a steeper wave, but yeah, no float, and it's grippy. Like, it's a little more grippy on the wave, but I kind of like having a little more looser feel maybe on my turns. Like when you're driving off the bottom for a bottom turn or something. I don't know, it didn't work for me. It didn't have the float I wanted. I couldn't side slip well with it. Feels weird to hold too, so when you're holding it, I'm used to having my hand on that pintail, and that's where I rest it. But I don't know where to put it with the Blair Acuda. It's either I'm off center or I'm in the side. Yeah, or in the middle. It's strange. So
you don't like holding the butt crack of your skimboard?
No, I don't like fingering my skimboard.
Fingering. Matthew hand dropping the skimboard.
Yeah, the pin, not only versatility, but maybe more importantly, consistency. And I think that goes through the whole range of, because when I see beginners on the Blair Acuda, I'm like, ugh. If you enjoy the skimboard, and that's something that helps you motivated to like be into skimboarding, that's fine. But it takes a really talented rider to get exactly what you want out of a Blair Acuda. Even a Dude Cruise, it takes a really talented rider to push into. Something like a pin like the Victoria Lift shape, that is just the perfect balance of board. Their original pro shape was a bit more Laguna, Orange County specific, great for like wedge and Aliso. But the lift shape, man, you can slot in the waves at Aliso, and then like you say, you can go up to Santa Cruz and ride like mushy, slow liners, still have a lot of volume in the front. But if you want to make a quick turn or do tricks, that tail is the one thing about the Blair Acuda that, I've tried one, and again I didn't like it. I would need to make adjustments, maybe to size. I guess you wouldn't want to adjust the shape, then it's not the Blair Acuda. But I would need to like push it bigger and bigger, and then you have to ride tail heavy like Blair. Obviously I'm a bit bigger than Blair, so I would need a quite large Blair Acuda, but then you need to ride super tail heavy, and it's like inconsistent. It's crazy that he does 3 shoves and big spins consistently on basically a double tailed board, because that tail it's really fun if you're driving a hard turn, I'm sure, on like really big waves. But the fact that he's like doing 3 shoves and trying kickflips on that thing, I'm like, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. Like, I don't want to get too nostalgic, but if anybody remembers the older Blair edit when he was just riding the pin, that Adam Hayward made, like, it was a little different. I'm gonna be honest. It was like, and I don't want to say it was age, because he's still just as smooth and consistent now, but he slotted into everything like so much more perfectly then. And I kind of like how Timmy slots into waves now. It's a little different. He rides that real narrow board, so he slots in real smooth because it's still like twin tip. It's still really basic and consistent. But with how narrow it is, he does all these like weird little chip shot things. Like at Aliso, when you have to run the low road to get in, he'll like run it a little bit higher and then like drop it real low. Especially with those lanky legs. It's just like cheating you guys with your lanky legs.
Yeah, I mean, Blair could also ride anything. Like, he could ride a piece of plywood and make it look good. And same with the cat surf, like you're saying. Kids see Blair riding a cat surf and like, oh, like, I'm gonna do all these cool airs.
Makes
and,
it look real fun.
Yeah, it's like, well, that guy could be riding, like, a boogie board, surfing at Rincon and make it look better than any guy out there.
Yeah, he does do that.
Yeah, so, I mean, yeah. It's not necessarily his shape, it's just he makes it look good. The shape could have no advantage whatsoever, and he would still rip.
Yeah, I think it, and then Austin's still in the hybrid. Sam's always ridden the pro shape. Like, he'll go to East Coast event with the pro shape. So
same with Lucas, I think.
Yeah. Lucas.
Yeah. So and Lucas is riding very different from Blair's in a way. So it's aggression versus like smoother style consistency, but so Lucas is taking advantage of that board shape. But like, dude, in a lot of these contests, I don't want to eat my words, but like the way Lucas rides competitively, because I prefer Blair's riding, but if I'm just going to extrapolate, then it's like, oh, Timmy's the best skimboarder because he looks good all the time. But if I was a judge in an event, dude, I am picking Lucas's riding on a pro shape like every day of the week for who's absolutely maximizing skim. Like, Blair gets a good wave, does a 3 shove, and it looks good while doing it. Well, that's like really basic, generic riding. If I was judging a contest, it's like, well, then I either want Timmy riding away really. Actually, a better example would be like Weber. He looks at waves completely different than any of us do, and it's partly because of his skill set, but it's also just his style, like where he turns, how he turns, where he's going to set up, how he's going to go down the line, especially because he's so early. And then Lucas looks at everything differently. Everything's just like a skate park to him, and that's rad. And I think that that riding should be more rewarded. I like people doing different things, and Austin in his own way did very different things, like super aerial and like kind of almost dramatic style. Everything was like big, especially with his dreads flowing with every turn, like. But it's just his skimming style looks great. Everything looks real big. Blair's just like the perfect skimboarder. But if I'm as a judge, I'm sort of like, I don't know. Are you pushing it? But I come from the era of my favorite skimboarders were like Grady Archibald, who would like almost never get out of the first round because he would just try his hardest tricks the whole time. He didn't care about winning. It was like I'm either gonna get first or last, or Brandon Roth, who is probably like an inspiration of Timmy, would just do slightly different tricks and then real smooth. Kind of cool things like Tim Fulton does with like, he does the late shove and sometimes he'll do like a frontside 3 shove or something really weird like that. I think that needs to be rewarded more, but I think it's a shame both of those styles I'm talking about are just objectively harder on a Blair Cuda or even a Dude Cruise or something like Jaiden's riding.
And how do you judge that too? That's one of my biggest gripes with skimboarding with all these different styles. Like, I think Blair makes the waves look the best. But like you said, Lucas is probably objectively the most technically talented skimboarder in the world. And how do you judge those two? And I feel like there's a disconnect there, especially in contests today with judging. And like, for instance, if you do an air out the back, why is that considered a completed ride if you don't make it back to the beach? But like, 2013 Oktoberfest, Austin won it with a huge air out the back. I remember like a Superman flip and it was sick. But how do you judge that if you didn't actually ride it back up the beach? It's like, I don't know. There's just some gaps that need to be filled, I feel like, in that criteria.
That's one of the more tough ones, because one of my judging criteria, if I were to judge, and this might be the reason I'm not a judge, one of my judging criteria is I want to see you do something that other people can't do or can't do consistently. And this is, I think David touched on this, talking about events like Aliso. It's like, dude, I've been skimming for like over 20 years. I don't care about a backside wrap to barrel. I don't care that you sort of got lucky enough to get the best wave. And it's like, well, they didn't fall, they completed it. I'm like, I don't care. If you're an amateur, sure, like, it's good that you took advantage of a wave. But if you're a pro and you just get a backside wrap to barrel, as far as I'm concerned, you didn't take advantage of it. That's just that's a warm-up wave for a pro. And then, so if I take that thinking, then I have to look at an Austin Air out the back and go, well, nobody's doing that. So how do you judge that? And it's like, well, you have to say, the problem is if he lands an air like that and it goes back on the wave by some magical, like it's a liner more, then that's an easy 10. So an out the back air, I think you'd have to just, it's not a rule, but a precedent of like, it's never a 10. You did a Superman flip, and you landed on the board, and you sunk in the water. Looks like the board's under your feet. Hey, that's good, man. That's somewhere, like a 7 and a 9, depending on amplitude and whatever. But it's not going to be a 10. And I think that would be fair enough, but you got to reward it still. And because if you didn't, I think some of that stuff wasn't rewarded back in the day. Dude, Mo Just used to just have kickflips. He used to have them.
Yeah.
I don't think he stopped doing them because of contests. He probably just stopped doing them because they're kind of lame. But when they're not rewarded in contests necessarily, then it's like, yeah, why would you do it? And if the only way to get rewarded is to do it back onto a wave, 99.9% of days of beaches don't support that. Especially because we can't have contests at like Wedge or 10th Street. You really need a weird cider A-frame or liner to do it back onto the wave. Maybe Balboa when it gets linery. But we haven't had a linery event recently. They've been like huge short poundy events recently, which is cool, but kind of a shame because if you look at some of the older videos, we used to just get these weird wind swells that came in at an angle and they just went whap, and the whole contest. It was a shame if you're, I don't know, probably better if you're front side, and if it was your backside, it was kind of lame. But it made a really interesting contest. How long have you been skimming pro?
So in 2016, I thought that was like the zenith of my skimboarding. Like I was probably the best I've ever been. I was like 19 years old. I think it's been so long. 20 years old. And I broke my fibula in Oktoberfest, and I was like, oh, this was the year I thought I had a really good chance at winning semi-pro, and just one fall kind of ruined it. But after that, I was like, honestly, like I felt like I was the best rider in the pack, and I wanted to turn pro. So I tried pro in 2017 when I recovered from my injury. Didn't go great. I got really intimidated in the heats, so I went back to skimming amateur, and then, like I said earlier, I won the Vic twice. I placed in multiple other contests, won Malibu. So yeah, then I got in contact with Victoria just expecting a discount, and they were like, oh, like, would you be interested in maybe doing pro? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's something I've always wanted to try. It's something I want to test the waters kind of. So yeah, we kind of worked out a really solid deal for me, and I agreed to do pro contest levels and represent them. And yeah, as of last year, I did Oktoberfest, and I think that was the only contest I did. I was sick on the Vic, unfortunately, but yeah.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah, I know, that's every contest now.
Oh yeah, that year. Yeah, good year to miss.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at now. I'm still probably going to do pro if I'm recovered in time for this summer. It's just the intimidation is hard. You go from amateur level where you're like, okay, I'm the best one here, it's mine to lose, to going to pro and being like, okay, now I'm the worst one here, and everyone has tech, I don't have tech, so I have to make sure I rely on my front side. That kind of makes me unique, and if I can't get front sides, then I'm just a generic, like you said, backside wrap. So yeah, it's intimidating. It sucks being one of the worst ones, I'd say, but yeah, it's a learning experience.
Yeah, I rode that tweener phase for a while, and it should have been easier for me because we had amateur only events, and you just had events where, kind of like how you're saying, when you go to the Vic, and like the last time I skimmed the Vic, I wouldn't even say I was at a pro level, but I skimmed pro just because I was like, dude, if I win the amateur, especially as you're getting older, it's okay because if you're winning amateur as a teen or whatever, it makes sense. You don't necessarily want to skim against pros when you're a teen. So, like, that's cool. That's you building. But once you get to proper pro age, and if you're at a pro level, like, you really shouldn't be entering amateur. I mean, if you're good enough, because even at a contest like Vic, but especially at other contests, it's like you're in a weird tweener spot where you can get knocked out round one in pro, or you can win amateur and get a free skateboard and feel like a sandbagging asshole because the other dudes might have been like legit amateurs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I felt. It's like every year I'd show up to the Vic and I was like, well, I'm probably going to win my age division, especially once I got past the more competitive, like 18 to 21, which was super competitive when I used to do that. It was like Nathan Flanagan, Jared Green, the Detman twins, Jack Klingman, and it was all of us just battling that amateur division. Then I got to 22 to 24, and it's like, okay, now it's just guys who are trying kind of going out there for fun and probably don't skim a lot and probably have never competed. So it's like, yeah, I was sandbagging basically, and yeah, so I guess it was time to take that next step, but well, hopefully it gets better than it has been for me.
Yeah, well, at least, and that was the thing, is like when I competed pro, you'll have like a heat with Brandon Sears and Jake Stinnett at Peluso, and you're like, well, at least I competed against the best, and then if you skim well, that's just another bonus. You skim against the best, get good waves, and if you actually have a good heat, even if you get knocked out or whatever, it's like, shit, at least you did that than just skim the worst conditions, beat some guys that are like new or out of shape or whatever, just proper amateurs. Because yeah, at 18 to 21's pretty rad. We kind of have like a weird, I swear we have an age dead spot of that time period around 2015. Whatever that age spot works out to now is like kind of dead in the amateurs, where it should be really insane or whatever. These are kind of like older teens or early 20s people, and then you have the tiny young kids, which are, dude, the 9 to 11s were objectively more exciting than watching the pros this year. They're like legit skimming better than some pros, and it brought me back to the days of when I was growing up and skimming amateur. Like, my heats were Sam Stinnett, and like I think Brad Donkey was too young. Blair was definitely too young, but my heat was dudes like Sam Stinnett and Tim Fulton, and God, that's how it felt at the time. Like, I can't imagine being a 9 to 11 and then just skimming against Colton. It's like, what? That's a bummer. It feels like a pro event at that point. You're like, dude, I'm still in the amateur division. Like, why he's a pro? Why do I have to skim against Colton? But it's good to see that age group is strong and should lead into this little dead spot of skimming. And it's a shame because it's the era of Blair, and he should have had some more competition. I think there was a dead spot where he didn't have much. I mean, we needed to literally source good competition from Brazil to get somebody really at his level. A lot of the guys that are still giving him good competition are actually more my age. They're a bit from that previous generation, because it's like after, I think it's sort of like after Blair's generation. I don't know how old he's probably like your age.
He's like a year older than me, yeah. Yeah.
But it's sort of, I guess it would be almost your generation that has the dead spot.
Close.
And that's probably how...
Only people I can think of around my age who are kind of there are like Dane, Zach, Chad's getting there.
That was the big one.
Yeah.
Well, how old is... Do we know how old Zach and like Timmy are?
Zach, I think, is my age. I think he's 18 or 19. And I think Timmy's probably around his age.
Is he a little?
There's two Timmys though. The
You're talking about Gamboa?
Yeah.
what's the other guy's name? Timmy.
Vitala.
Yeah, he's probably your age, right?
I think he's probably mid-20s as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Live in Hawaii
Time
now.
flies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're probably around 23, 24, if I had to take a guess.
I think maybe kids weren't as motivated, but seeing Dane would be like the same age as Zach, right?
Yeah.
Similar.
I've actually competed against them before in Santa Cruz, and they were like 15 or something. They were like already better than me.
Yeah,
Super
just ahead of it.
standouts.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's heck.
Dane is insane, and I'm hoping that people like Dane and Zach continue with their stuff. But it's still, I don't know what results they have. And there's kind of newish pros.
Dane won Florida or something, right?
Yeah, he won. I'm not sure if he won it all. I think it was Vic East or something like that, like
that
Delaware, Dewey Beach. One of those.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
That-
suits him.
That beach and Dane Cameron.
His tech is nuts. Like on those smaller days, like he's throwing like 720 shoves and stuff. So
Yeah, just ahead of it all.
I love the way he was skimming. I wasn't really familiar with him. I'd heard his name and I was just like, oh, he's a Grom, like another good Grom from Laguna. I'm not surprised, whatever. Then I saw him skim and I was like, holy shit, he is really like the best thing since sliced bread. I was more focused on like Little Hendy because his style is so sick, but Dane's like attack on skimming is so fucking rad. I mean, technically Blair kind of skims that way, but I like Dane's almost like if you just had a little bridge between Lucas and Blair.
yeah.
So you throw in that aggression, keep it real fast, and that like he rides like real small boards, kind of smaller dude, but he still keeps it because it's hard to keep style when you're doing stuff like Lucas. You can't necessarily do 2-3 shoves out to a wave and look like you're just floating. That's an athletic performance. That's effort right there. But Dane is bridging that gap to where he'll do like 3 shove, either do more like a schwack or even sometimes air the wave and then do a big spin after. But he didn't look like shit. I'm like, he should look like shit. At least a big spin. Like at some point you got to run out of steam and effort just manipulating water like that. But he really looked good the whole time. I hope that generation can hold over because there's these little dead spots between Dane, Zach, and 9 to 11s, and then even a little bit between, I guess, Dane, Zach, and just my age group, which would be like all your Sams and Tim Fultons and Teddy Vlassies and whatnot.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's waxing and waning like that.
Are you competing this year, Jaiden?
Yeah, I'm gonna
There you
enter a
go.
few comps. Yeah.
Nice. Which ones?
I want to stay away from the Vic.
That's honestly one of the easier ones. Oktoberfest is the hardest, in my opinion.
I just don't want to skim total trash because I don't have tech. I don't practice tech at all. So if there's no waves, I'm like, I might as well just forfeit the comp.
I don't know. I don't really do tech, and like, it's more about completion. I feel like just even if it's a small, tiny like shit Aliso wave, if you can just hit it and bring it back to the beach in those divisions, like I feel like that's all that matters. Your division can be kind of tough though, I guess. You probably got some rippers in there.
I got some guys. When I went to Santa Cruz, the guy I went against, Reef, was really good.
Who?
His name is Reef.
Oh.
Yeah. He's super good. But the other thing, I'll probably do some Santa Cruz ones. Probably the Velovic again. My parents want to drive me. And either the Vic or Oktoberfest or something. Just do it. Whichever one has better waves.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you for not wanting to do the Vic, because
Seems like it's always bad.
there's just issues with the. Well, even if it's good, then you kind of have to skim for the Laguna style judges. I don't think Oktoberfest has the same. I wouldn't know. I don't know who the judges are now, especially now because I'm so detached. But dude, back in the day when I was skimming, Aliso was like the legends were the judges, and you're like, oh no. Like if it's all big barrels, then just whoever is more local and kind of better than you, especially for wave selection, is going to win. And then if it's shit waves, then they're just going to underscore whatever tech I do. And if somebody like Tim Fulton finds like some shitty trophy wave and kind of like gets a head dip, they're like, there it is, boys.
Yeah.
We got the wave we were looking for. I don't know what that fucking weirdo was doing over there. Like, frontside big spin? What the hell? That's not even a trick. But
localism with the judging is totally a thing too. No matter where you go, they're giving the local guys higher scores. It's just how it works.
Yeah, and it's awkward because I don't know if Peluso had a time where he was trying to avoid that, because if you're gonna have an event and have this United Skim Tour and sort of make a big deal out of it, gosh, it's really bad if the pro riders are judging the amateurs and you have weird stuff like this. If anybody would have been a good objective judge, it'd be somebody like me from LA who has no friends and doesn't have any ties to anybody. But I don't know. I didn't ask about judging big events, but I don't know if they necessarily want me. I think Exile, maybe they'd be more interested, but I couldn't imagine asking the Vic guys like, "Hey, I'm from LA and have really strong opinions about things. Can I be a judge?"
Yeah, I remember at Oktoberfest this year, I'm pretty sure they just had like random people coming up and judging it after like, I don't know, it's like 2 heats or something. They just like call out for random people. Whoever wanted to judge could come up. Pretty sure that's how they ran it this year. They did something like that.
Probably not necessarily, because their judging system is super different now. Back in the day of pen and paper, you really could just be like, "Hey, we don't have enough judges like for the next heat. Like, Chris had to leave and take care of his kids, so somebody else needs to come in and judge." But now, I think, did Vic do digital judging as well this year?
I don't know, but the previous years they had it with the iPads.
Yeah. So
they overheated.
So they probably did it. Yeah. I don't know. It's tough because you have to. I'm not sure if that system is too complex. I'm sure you're gonna run somebody through it real quick, but yeah, I don't know if you could have random people do it as just from the technical standpoint of how frustrating it is now. Ironically, David was saying something about how, I forget what the issue was. Like, I haven't looked at the system. I wish David was here to explain it, but he was just saying, like, when you have a skim event, let's say like 3 riders go at the same time or whatever, for pen and paper, not that hard, kind of frustrating, but like, it's just pen and paper. But it seems really hard to do with the iPads and keep track. And it's like, I believe it because I'm not a big phone guy. I've always been a computer guy. And Clay with what is this series called?
The Premier Skimboarding League.
Clay is just, doing things to tackle these problems, and I love it. Apparently that system he used, digital system, he gives it some tactical, he'll like use a keyboard or something. And that's great because like, if you asked me to dude, every time I type like a text to my girlfriend, there's just typos and weirdness and nonsense. Or if I'm trying to, I don't know, touchscreens are so fidgety and frustrating to use. and then a keyboard is just so certain. And especially if you were, it'd be really cool if you had that digital system, if you had just one of those small keyboards where it's just like numbers and then programmable keys where you could go like forward, back, etc. That would be clutch. But I think ultimately going forward they're probably going to use touchscreens just because of the simplicity, and especially judging skimboarding in sand and keyboards probably don't go well together. Hammond, do you want to talk about anything?
I'm trying to think if I missed anything. I have like some good skim stories, but it's probably not worth sharing, and might push some buttons if anyone ever hears them. So
I know. We're not really gonna dive into that yet.
Maybe
but,
off camera.
maybe someday of the podcast we can get a little more loose with it. But it is a unfortunate that. I mean, even just for me, even just criticizing whatever contests and judges was like, everything was like taboo back in the day, and it still is now. But I'm like, why? Skimming, maybe because it's a smaller community. Like, in surfing, you can be like a scathing. There are people who've been making careers off being like a scathing asshole in surfing, and it's like, sure, maybe it's not how everybody should do it, but like, you need some scathing assholes to get stuff done. Clearly, things can be problematic if you're just surrounded by sycophants and you're, everything you do is awesome, and also just glorifying the old way of doing things and being roots and whatever. And I'm glad that events like Oktoberfest and Vic are moving into that digital age, especially with the live judging. That needed to be a thing for so long. Like, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's like, if a judge is going to give me a score, whatever score that is, whatever he decides and bias that is, I need to know it. I need to know if I do a tech line at Aliso and I thought it was pretty good, and then I hear a score that's not good, I'm not going to do that tech line. Yeah. And I need to know that. But before, because being from LA, dude, I used to just go to Laguna contests, just do my 3 shoves and my big spins, and get just 1s and 2s and 3s, and they don't care if you rode the between set waves and did tricks. And that's the hard thing. Like, for a while, I had to tell everybody that when they were competing, especially if they're not from Laguna. I'm like, don't go for the between waves unless you have to. Warm up on a couple, put in some low scores so that you have stuff to build on. But the second half of the heat, you are wasting your time, because by that point, typically one of the better riders has ridden the set, and the judges are no longer interested in the between waves. Once the precedent has been set between that heat, like, it doesn't matter which rider did it, it's hard to tell judges to be like as objective and unbiased, but if somebody gets a good wave in the heat, that changes the dynamics for the rest of the heat. You can't have Blair getting like an in and out barrel and then be like, well, that's unfortunate, but I'm going to try a little 3 shove on a 1 foot wave. That's pointless. You're just wasting your time. Now you have to say, he lost priority, and you got to go, the next set is mine. And if it's not an ideal set, that sucks, but I have to go for it and try to make a score similar to what he did.
Yeah, learning how to compete, like learning how the judging works, learning how what they're looking for and what to do in what situation is huge. And I think that was part of why I started to have more success at the amateur level. But I mean, even then, I'm still not, I'd say, I'm an expert. For instance, last Oktoberfest, I got last in my heat. I had one good front side, and it was my first wave. I waited for it, and it was put me in the lead with that one wave. And then I just couldn't find a backup score because I was staying at the top of the beach like a dumbass, waiting the entire heat basically, and then went for an ankle high wrap. So yeah, I mean, like you were saying, just knowing what to do when and what the judges are looking for and how to adapt to the conditions is huge. And I think so many people outside of Laguna, outside of Orange County, don't know how to read the conditions and compete in those conditions.
Yeah, I remember that heat, and unfortunately I was like busy filming, but I just remembered kind of the end of it. I was like, I wish I had yelled out to you. It's really good to have somebody on the beach in your heat. And that was a big thing when I was initially competing. And when I say somebody, obviously it'd be nice to have me going like, hey, your area from where I'm sitting is just shit. It's not working. This guy's down here getting good waves. Go sit on him and pressure him. And go take his priority after he goes. Otherwise you're not. But it doesn't even need to be that. Sometimes just whoever, one of your friends, doesn't have to be somebody who skims. Just having somebody to look at and take yourself out of the heat for a little bit. Because I would always show up to events alone, being from LA, and I was just like, I'm going to do my thing. And it's like, you can't skim like that. You're not going to do well like that. I mean, even if you're really talented, it's wave dependent. You know, it's like surfing. It's so challenging. So you have to get lucky on top of being talented. But, you know, you can create your own luck by being real. You cannot get tunnel vision in a heat. And I think a lot of people do that. They're like focused on their waves, their fitness. Like, man, I'm breathing a lot right now. Like, am I going to be ready for this? Or I just fell and didn't make a wave. Oh, I'm so devastated. Like, no. You need to talk to somebody. You need to get out of every minute that passes. You need to be totally beyond it, not even thinking about it. And it's best to just be currently looking at you should always be looking at your other competitors and not even necessarily watching them and being like, oh, I need to skim better than the last wave they got. But you need to be thinking where you should be standing to get the chance of the wave. Because that's all like skimming and surfing is. It's where you're sitting, especially in like a 3 to 4 person heat. Obviously with 2 person, if they're actually enforcing priority, that's pretty easy. But 3 to 4, that priority gets real mushy if you're not going for the exact same peak. And if they go for the right and it's a really good wave, and you go for the left and it's not as good of a wave, it's going to be even worse score. Because it just got directly compared as opposed to standing alone and being judged by its own right.
What tide did you get that? I call it South Deer, but I forget what you call it. What do you call it?
Yeah, we call it South Deer.
South Deer.
South Deer randoms.
Randoms.
That's what
What
I've
tide
heard.
was that? Like a super high tide, yeah?
It was like 6 foot, yeah.
Yeah, that's when I've seen it.
6 foot, and it was like, I don't know how big this well was. Maybe like a 1.7 west-southwest.
You were like way down the beach from the rocks too, right?
Yeah.
That's weird.
The primaries, it's usually like rocky or like no run-up, or it's just too fucking far out to actually get the wave.
Because that's where I've caught it, is right at that rock, and like it connects like to the wave out there. It was kind of fun.
It's like mini Sununga.
Yeah.
It's pretty sick.
I really want to get Latigo, but I've never seen it good.
That spot is just such a pain in the ass to even check.
Latigo?
Yeah, you just go. I'm just like, I drive somewhere. I'm like, it already took me like 30 minutes to get here. I'm like, I can check Latigo right now.
That cider looks sick there, though.
Yeah, but I'm like, should I check Latigo on like this like shitty tide, or should I just go to fucking Esco or something? Just go to Esco.
Esco. Same wave over and over again.
Yeah, seriously. But, I mean, it's been gone.
Like the sand?
Yeah.
At Esco?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Dude, the creek opened.
So it's like all gouged out there.
Yeah. Well, it's starting to build back now, but it's like the level of the sand is like so low. It's fucking weird. But there is just the whole U like scooped out of sand for like months. Like it was fucked.
You miss Malibu?
It's fun when it works.
I have more fun there than anywhere.
Yeah.
Just because there's no one there and there's so many waves that you can choose from.
It's just like a more chill wave. Like it never gets too crazy there. Where you
like
have to
Western
fucking,
gets
like,
kind of
worry.
gnarly.
Well, yeah, Westward and Magoo definitely get the craziest out of all the beaches there, but I don't know. I haven't seen Westward. It's like that time that I met you, pretty much. I haven't seen it that good since. I don't know what the fuck happened.
Yeah, they were sick. With Mike.
Yeah, Mike and I think Les is there.
Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know. There's like no sand at South Deer when I was there though. Like that spot just comes and goes. Like I've seen it with sand after South Swell. I've seen it with sand after East Swell. Like it doesn't care. It just gets sand at random times.
East Swell, huh?
Yeah, I've seen it with sand after an East Swell.
Just pulling off the
Yeah.
mainland.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck happened.
Just a nice aquifer swell.
Yeah. I don't know how it was an east swell. It was like a northeast. I was like, I didn't know this existed, but whatever.
Well, Deer has all the rocks that are actually outside in the water. I think it just
You got the reefs and
direct sand real weird. And he used to just make the sickest sandbars.
shit.
But I think what you'd ideally want is a bunch of cross swells, smaller, medium cross swells, like coming in all year, all season, doing different things. Now it's, I don't know, the weather's so weird. It's sort of like pretty flat, and then a monster winter swell just goes whap, and then ruins all your sand.
Yep.
You're like, okay, and then you get a bunch of small things, but it's not enough. And then you have another one of those big swells. Like you may have finally built some sand, and then that big swell comes and just
Yes.
takes it all out again.
That's exactly what it is.
I don't know why it's like that now.
You used to be able to get like legit in and out to Deer Creek. I feel like you would have those A-frame kind of Aliso
A-frames,
like, yeah.
But way more hollow than Aliso.
Yeah.
Because Aliso still, I don't know why. Aliso still crumbles for whatever reason. Like, you know, but the way the bottom is, you think it should be like throwing. Sometimes it does. But Deer Creek it has that Malibu Ventura style wave where it properly throws off the top. And I don't know, maybe the sand is smoother and has like a ramp up, whereas Aliso is deep water and then it gets real shallow. I don't think the waves respond all that well to that, and that's kind of what causes a lot of the bad days at Aliso.
Mm-hmm.
Just really weird sand and deep spot, but that's what makes Malibu Ventura so good, and why you can have, there's so many shots of like shore break at basically any beach from Malibu Ventura where it's shore break throwing and just spitting because it just has such a perfect round nature to it, but kind of hard to get it on a day like that skimming wise because it'd be far out.
I feel like it's like the water speed is dependent there too. Obviously the angle of the beach. But they're all like, I think it's kind of good. It's good for regular, obviously. They're moving right. But it's like with the water speed there, I feel like you can be, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's less like intense there. So you can kind of do more on the wave comfortably.
Kind
That
of.
makes sense.
I think it's still
Yeah.
fast.
But it's not like Aliso fast. Like Aliso
think-
is just crazy.
I think the bigger thing is sometimes the shoulder is less powerful in Ventura Malibu. Aliso can be intimidating because it gets a bit more wide open and you don't have the same sandbar setup. Like a lot of times in Deer Creek Ventura, you can like watch a wave come in for a while and you just, I mean, the day we did the Magoo event, you just went to Deer Creek and you were like picking off little rights the whole day, and it looked fun. I wish we had it there, but you can just watch the wave come in and like pick the shoulder perfect. Aliso is, you see a swell, and then sort of before it's really cresting, you just have to make a decision. It's like a faith-based decision to go for a wave at Aliso because it'll go from nothing to a complete shoulder wall. It doesn't have like a little chip-in slot to go in. It's pretty rare unless it's smaller Aliso. But if you're going for a set wave, a bigger Aliso, that is a complete faith-based start, and then you have to navigate a sketchy turn, and then like immediately when it's done, it's usually into the barrel. It's very hard to make that. It's also hard to cut into the face because it's such a scary fast turn. It shoots you straight to the beach. It's so hard to actually cut in, which is maybe why the Blair is a great board for Aliso, because if you can make the initial turn on that board, you can just dig the inside edge like a knife to try to stay in that line. It's super hard. Dude cruises will go, every time I'm just shooting back up the beach straight into the parking lot because I can't pull that wide board back into the wave.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the drive.
Yeah, which is why I am trying to get a new board, because back in the day I used to have like pretty normal boards for Aliso, but mostly I had talent, like kind of how you make up for a board that looks like, oh, that'd be really hard to ride, or I can't believe you can do that on that. I used to ride kind of boards like that and do fine. Like I would ride West Street with that square, and everybody like, that's so weird. I'm like, it's not that bad. But I was also 19, 20 and could kind of do anything at that time. But now my turns are like super slow, and I was trying to ride the Dude Cruise at Aliso, and it's like you get hung up every time if you don't force the issue. And I don't know if I have the style or even the initial running speed to just, because that's what I do now, is I try to go early and I just turn like I hope the wave is still there by the time I'm done turning. At a place like Aliso, it's already whitewashed and you're going to the parking lot. But in LA, I can do that bullshit like, and it'll something. By the time I'm turned around, though, it'll reform on the inside.
Yeah, that's how I turn at Magoo. I just see a wave. I start turning the moment I get on the board.
Turning in.
And by the time I'm past the lip, I'm just in the pocket.
Turning in its general direction.
Yeah, it's like a 10-second long turn.
Eventually, something will work out. Yeah, that's why it's hard to skim Laguna. It's really best to get the turn over with, and like, if you can snap it like Blair, it's even better because that part can be good. But for me, when I skim, the initial turn is almost like survival. It's like I just need to get on the wave, and then if I can ride the wave after, then I can start putting my own personal touches on it. But just getting into the wave is hard. Like when you go to 10th and you make that connection, somebody like Blair or Timmy will like whap or do an air. Like for me, the connection is like, all right, everybody, let's chill out. I'll stay low on the inside. I'm like, okay, Lip, let's chill out. Don't take my board out from the way too fast.
Yeah, that Aliso wrap is just throwing it under the hood, wrapping it super low on the wave, and all those guys down there have it down. But I'm totally like you. I go to the wrap at the top of the wave, and I like getting that speed kind of on the way back down, and then getting a pump. I can't just like toss it underneath the
It's
lip
so
like that.
weird how you have to skim it. You can think you're going low, and then you're stuck on the top.
Yeah.
You need to be turning before you even get to the wave, and the wave is catching up with you. But that feels really weird too, because then you're like turning on flat, and then see the dudes like Cody Lopez and Tim Fulton have it dialed because they break traction essentially. They're when they are at the apex of their turn, they're not driving. It's not like a Blair turn. They're just going and then they fall into the barrel. Obviously not easy to do, otherwise everybody would be doing it. But that style was so fucking good at Aliso because even Blair's turns, he still has to, he draws a line, a circle, and that circle has to end up somewhere ideal on the wave. If it doesn't, then he has the same issue as like everybody else. But when it was like super big and closed out and challenging Aliso, people like Cody and Tim they forced the issue. And then even to a lesser extent, like that's what Hendy did back in the day. But it was just slightly less aggressive. But Hendy watching Hendy skim is how I learned that the barrel is affected by your turn. I never knew that when I started skimming, but when you watch how Hendy would turn on a wave, you're like, it was like the shittiest, crumbliest wave or whatever, and he just rounds it out and then opens up the whole face. I'm like, that's cool. I can't do it, but that's fucking cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started noticing that after you told me that. And then, obviously position's important, but if you get like a shitty turn, and just like chandelier the whole wave, then you're not gonna get anything out of it. Yeah, it's all about the turn line.
Yeah, turning hard, opening it up.
Yeah, position.
Yeah, kind of hard to learn, kind of hard to do and learn in LA, but it's kind of critical in LA because, I don't know, it's cringe watching people go for barrels in the LA area. I'm like,
I know, I don't even like it. Like
the little ankle-high barrel, and they're going like this.
Like this, against the wave going the opposite
it just crumbles
direction.
over their back, and they think they get barreled. I see that so often.
It's hard. I mean, you kind of got to learn the feel and the skill set of doing that, but I'm like, maybe don't.
Right.
Maybe don't bend down if it's like below your knee, and it wasn't even. It was like if you were at a weird place that was knee high and it was throwing, it would at least be fun. Kind of the way Beef's TV films like mini barrels. Like, hey, if it's actually barreling, it's fun. But yeah. You got to be in the 9 to 11 division to be allowed to do head dips like that.
He looks like fucking Yoda.
No, he looks like Dobby.
Dobby. Let him lick you right on the nostril, then. You're a fucking savage.
Do you guys watch surfing at all?
Like the contest and shit?
I haven't been watching WSL lately because they do so many events that what it did was it saturated it to where I like wouldn't notice when the real events were up. They could like announce Pipe Masters on WSL channel or something, and I'd be like, WSL in my feed again doing some event. Like it was so often they're covering so many amateur events, and it's a bummer because every now and again I have to like pull myself out of it and be like, wait, this is Chopu. Like I need to actually watch the WSL stream for once. But I've gotten used to ignoring it, which is really unfortunate. I don't really like how they're running that channel.
Yeah, I agree. They have like a 2-month break and then it's back to the contest again. So it's like basically the whole year they have contests. But yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on anymore. You have like the QS 2000, the QS 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
You good over there?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're like dying, bro.
I thought of his shit breath. And I remembered you saying that they used to call you Matthew Handjob because you throw.
I didn't know any better. I just was like, oh, I got the sand on my board, so I was like, just tossing it on there.
Yeah, I was fucking trying so hard not to laugh my ass off.
Yeah, that's funny.
That shit.
I just wanted to be there the day. I wanted to be there the day that Hammond was like, wait a second.
Here's the thing though, the sand is wet, like, because it'd be high tide, so I couldn't really kick it because it was like kind of hard. So I had to like scoop it with my hand and like loosen it up and start tossing it on there.
Homie's walking back to the parking lot to get some of that good dry sand, hand job it onto the board so he can skim a bit.
Matthew Handjob. It's so fucked up.
Les started calling me that.
Who started it?
I think Les.
Matthew Handjob.
Damn, you should definitely enter contests with that moniker.
Yeah. It's my last name, Handjob.
No, just Matthew Handjob Hammond. Rolls off. It's like a wrestler name. Thanks for coming on and doing this. Hopefully we have a nice contest season this year. We'll see more of you in the pro division and then maybe some amateur Jaiden appearances.
Amateur semi-pro.
And I'll probably be at them filming and whatnot. So, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you this season.
Of course.
Thank you. It was fun.
It was cool.
Hit me up if you guys want to do that skim contest thing for Reddit. I'd be glad to help out because, like we said, we need more than one person doing it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
When you asked about the Gold Coast Classic, Gary from Santa Cruz keeps talking about how he's like gonna bring it back.
Yeah,
He's
dude.
like,
just make it happen.
he's like, I need your ass to do it though, and I'm like,
I'll
shit, just tell him.